Hi.
Thanks so much for taking the time to connect with us, to chat with us. And we're very excited to hear about your experience with TBL and the TBL Fundamentals Series and the role that it played in your journey. So before we start, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself, your name, the institution where you teach, and what subjects you cover.
All right, so my name is Elita Partosoedarso. I've been teaching at Ontario Tech University, which is in Ontario, Canada, for almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
It's hard to believe. So I started there as an adjunct or a sessional instructor, just teaching one course, and then moved to being a full-time continuing permanent employee there. So the courses I teach tend to be the more rigorous science-based courses. So I teach anatomy and physiology, I teach pharmacology, I teach pathophysiology. So none of them are bird courses per se. And my students are med lab science students, nursing students, pre-med, pre-dental, a lot of pre-students, pre-physio, whatever, speech pathology, kinesiology students. So a whole variety of students within the health science arena.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, before the TBL Fundamental Series, had you had like any experience with TBL? Had you used TBL before, or was this a totally new approach for you?
So this was a totally new approach to me, and I found out about it through emails from InteDashboard, and I started off by going to one of the free taster seminars, if you want to call them, and then I thought, oh, this sounds like a really neat idea. And I was also kind of bored in my teaching, so I wanted to change things up. And so I did the fundamental series. I think it's like 4 or 5 workshops, and really liked that. Enjoyed the people, the other participants in those workshop series. And I thought that they were very much like-minded individuals. So, I thought if they're thinking about doing it, then I can think about doing it as well.
Great. And are there any changes to the way you approach active learning before and after the TBL Fundamental Series?
Yes. So I usually teach, especially with anatomy and physiology, it is a first year course in our faculty across the different programs. And those classes tend to be large. So large by my definition is over 100. And so, for example, last term in the fall, I taught using the TBL method, I taught 2 classes of 180. And this semester, I'm teaching one class of 240 and another class of 150, and then also some smaller classes. So those are huge classes. Our classrooms um, are also maximized. So my class of 240, there's only 250 seats in the class. My class of 180, there's only 190 seats in the class. So it's really bumping up against the capacity there. Um, and yeah, and I also teach in a public university in Canada, and our students don't tend to have a lot of extra cash. And so I wanted to use TBL to increase their engagement while not having it cost anything to them. So that was my pain point there. And also the large class sizes.
Yeah. And how did the TBL Fundamental Series help you feel more prepared to facilitate those TBL sessions that you just described?
Well, I think it broke it down. It broke it down really nicely into what the different question sets should look like. There was one workshop in particular talking about group dynamics. So I appreciated that. And, I think it really, and then there was homework, which I did sometimes. So I think it helped actually just distill the essence of TBL into various different subjects. So yeah, so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm happy that it helped you like streamline your classes overall. And talking about overall teaching with TBL now, after you have after passing the TBL Fundamental Series, can you walk us through the first time implementing TBL in your classroom and what was overall the experience like?
Oh, okay. So overall, the experience was very overwhelming. So I first did it last term. And what I did as per TBL model was that I actually did assign seating for that. But let me show you. So this is, if I can share with you. So this is not from last term. So this is my current term. This is my class of 240. So you can see it's a huge classroom. All of the seats are full. Um, I've deliberately left empty seats in the back because it's a huge classroom. The overhead projector is so far away that students didn't want to sit in the back. These areas over here are sort of wings. And so this picture doesn't accurately represent the classroom because it's banked. So the seats are tiered and then it's also curved, right? And so what happens is students have access to this, and then down below, just give me a sec. Down below, they can actually look for their names, their group numbers, and then they can figure out where their group is located, and then grab one of those seats associated with their group. And so if you can see over here, what you can see is the groups span 2 rows, right? So each of these groups spans 2 rows. So the understanding is that students in the front row would actually turn their chairs backwards to talk with students in the back row. And that worked reasonably well because it's a bank classroom. The noise levels in the front of the classroom was unbelievably loud. But students tend to enjoy that after they got used to the flipped classroom model, after they got used to the way that things are done. I think one of the comments that students had right at the start was that they felt like they were being tested every single time they saw me, right? Because of the TRAT, IRAT application model. They're like, why are you testing us every single time? So that was their first comment in the first few weeks. And then after that, they're like, actually, it's not too bad because you're holding us accountable to actually go and do the work before actually coming to class and having it just little bites rather than, studying for a huge midterm or a huge final exam. They appreciated those little bites of information that they needed to actually understand before walking into the classroom.
All right. And since you had a big class size, did you also have a co-facilitator with you, or were you alone?
I had teaching assistants to help me actually run the class to help with the logistics and also to help with answering the questions. So what I would have is I had a Google Doc where I put all the questions that we were going to cover in class so that the TAs could actually have a look at them and familiarize themselves with the content as well as the questions so that they weren't sort of blindsided with the students.
And again, talking about your class and how you teach with TBL, how often do you use TBL in your courses now? And how many students participate in your TBL sessions? I think you already mentioned the number, but if you can also talk about the how many groups you have usually and how many people you have in each team.
All right, so I use TBL every single class that I don't have a midterm or a module test. And so that would be on average, that would be anywhere between 7 to 11 times in a 12-week semester. Um, The groups range in size from 4 to 6. So 6 being the upper limit, 4 being the group size for classes which are smaller, like under 50 students. And typically on any given day that TBL is run, I would have maybe 70 to 80% participation of the students. And they tend to be the same bulk of students that come every week and the same group of students that don't come every week. So um, I've had one student actually email me and said, I don't believe in this thing. I'd rather just bulk study and show up for my module test. And I don't want to study every week. I'm like, well, that's your prerogative. But very few people have expressed that sentiment.
Thanks for sharing that. And talking about students' reactions, I think you already talked about that some students were thinking that you're testing them through different TBL activities when you were starting to teach with TBL. Were there any other surprises along the way, and how did students respond to TBL?
I think they like it just fine. They like working in groups. I've made them switch groups between the fall semester and the current winter semester. Some of them like them, some of them didn't, but it was just necessary because students were enrolled in different sections. One of the questions that really stumped me when I first raised the issue of how we're going to run classes is one of the students raised her hand and said, Miss, what happens if a fight breaks out? And I was just so shocked by that question. So I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, what happens if we disagree with each other and a fight breaks out? And I said, well, hopefully you won't come to that situation. And over the next few weeks, I actually went through group dynamic exercises. I told them to assign each person a role. I told them to rotate the roles, and there was never a fight. And I spoke with the student that asked that question just last week, and she was laughing as well because she's like, yeah, that was a really stupid question. And I'm like, well, that's fair enough. New university, straight from high school, you don't know what to assume. That's a fair enough question. So that was one thing. Um, Students didn't like sitting in the back of the classroom because again, it's all paper based, and I would take up after the TRAT and the application sessions on the big projector, and so they thought that they couldn't really see what was going on. I'm gonna let my dog back in. Hey, come on. So that was another thing. I've thought about switching up their locations, but it's just too hard to do that. Yeah. One of the other things in terms of logistics, so for the class of 240, there were 44 groups. For the class of 150, there are 30 groups. And so for the larger class, the 240 with the 44 groups, it was a challenge trying to figure out how to deliver each of the group of question groups out and to collect them efficiently. So even with 4 TAs, teaching assistants in that class, it took quite a few minutes actually handing out the pieces of paper, and again, quite a few minutes actually collecting it up. So just in the last week, we actually made some improvements so that I used to have numbered cards with their group numbers. So, people in group 1 would sit where there was a group 1 card and so on and so forth. But last week I decided to do away with it and actually have the group number on the flip side of the handout. So I'm just going to share with you what it looks like. So this is the handout that they get for the IRAT. So this is the zip grade thing, so I can just scan it with my phone. They have the student number and last names and stuff. Questions are here, and I've got the answers here, although obviously I remove it. But then on the flip side, on the opposite side of that sheet of paper, they have the row number and the group number. And so this way it saves time because we have these pieces of paper laid out before students actually walk in. So I found that it saves time. And then also, and I know, this may be a no-no to do in TBL, but I don't care. I need to get minutes back in my process. And so this is what students get for the TRAT and the application question. So obviously there's two per, so we cut it in half because that was also another complaint that I was killing trees with all these paper that I printed out. And what I did was on one side, I would print out the TRAT questions, which are exactly the same as the IRAT. And then on the other side, I would actually print out the application questions. And so what this meant was it was only, instead of having two different times where the TAs would hand out these questions, it was only one time. And I was able to save time for the taking up of these questions. And you can see over here, the questions here start at question number 31 because I used the scratch card, the immediate feedback assessment technique. So again, students could actually see where they got it wrong, and they had second, third chances as well to get it right. So again, I think these things are just an improvement overall, and it gained me the minutes that I needed to actually run through the whole TBL exercises in a sort of more relaxed manner.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. But I think there was some technical issue. I couldn't see the screen. So if you could just share, just give it like, just if we can have like a glance at it of it.
Oh, you know what? I forgot to hit share.
No
Yeah.
worries.
So this is what it looks like. So they have so again, it's a normal US letter size, and I would cut it in half. And on one side, you would have the TRAT questions. And then on the other side, we would have the application questions. And so these would be obviously handed out at the same time. But I would tell students to actually work on the TRAT first before the application. And then the other thing is for the TRAT, I use the immediate feedback assessment technique, the scratch cards the students like to call it, so that the silver overlay over the correct answer has a star over it. And has a star under it, so that when students, for question number 31, they scratch off 31A, then there would be a star, and then they know that it was the right answer. If they scratched off B or C or D, there's no star, and then they'd have a second and third chance. The other thing is I use the same scratch card throughout the term. So for this class, I think we used TBL 9 times out of the 12 weeks, because we would have module tests for the other 3 weeks. And so I would just have the same scratch card over and over again. And that would, again, minimize waste and increase efficiency.
Yeah, of course. All right. I think just to talk about, like, since you went through this process, you joined our I think you joined our introductory course workshop on TBL orientation, Introduction to Team-Based Learning.
Yes.
And then from that you joined our TBL Fundamentals Series, and then you started teaching with TBL. And
that's right.
Someone who went through that process, like step by step, if we can say that, what advice would you give to educators who are new to TBL and are just starting out?
I think my advice would be to figure out how you can be efficient in the process, because the whole TBL model can be quite time consuming in terms of generating questions, in terms of formatting the questions. So figure out how to actually streamline the process. So again, in generating questions and formatting for the IRAT, TRAT, and application questions, I think in the beginning it would take me a few hours just to do that, but now I've got it down to probably about an hour. And that's to do 3 different versions on paper for each part, for 3 different classes. Right? So 3 different classes means 3 different set of questions, because I don't use questions in between for the same, yeah.
All right, this is helpful. Thanks for sharing. And when we talk about TBL Fundamentals Series, would you recommend the TBL Fundamentals Series to people who are just starting out with TBL, or they want to improve their knowledge of the fundamentals of TBL? Would you recommend the course to them? And if so, why?
Yes, I would heavily recommend the course, partly because I think it focuses, the workshop series focuses on different aspects for each workshop. So that's one thing. We also come away with a lot of resources to read beforehand and think about beforehand. And the community of practice can't be overstated, because I think it's nice to know that you're not alone. When I did the fundamental series, I know that there was a group from a single university. There were 4 or 5 of them there, and I thought, and I was quite honestly envious that they were doing it together. But there were also people like me, singles, who were just doing it because they felt there was some value to it, and so that was good. One of the things that, and I know the actual rolling out of TBL can be different depending on your institutional resources and what have you. But I think one of the less helpful comments I got was when I actually asked for help with how to actually physically run the TBL series given my constraints. And I got very little helpful feedback, because basically the comments I got was, spend some money and do this, or, have students move out of the classroom. And I'm like, I cannot have, 240 students move out of the classroom. So I thought it was, that was less than helpful. But again, I don't think anyone knows your constraints better than you do. So it's just a matter of maybe catching up with someone who's in a similar position and trying to figure out how they actually rolled it out. I have to admit, when I first read about it, went to workshop, I thought it was just going to be a one-hit wonder. That, I was just going to do it this year just for fun, and then be so overwhelmed by it, or felt so overworked by it, that I would never touch it again. But now that, I've done it for a term and a half, and I've figured out how to make it more efficient, and how to run the logistics of doing it in large classrooms, I feel like this is something that is sustainable for me to do for quite a few years. So yeah. And as I said, students really like it. The students that come really like it. The students that don't come, I don't know what to do with them. But yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about it and trying to engage more of my colleagues for it. So I'm presenting a workshop in a university wide teaching and learning seminar, as well as presenting it in a conference in May for international, for people who teach anatomy and physiology, which is what I teach. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, thank you very much. Once again, thanks again for sharing your experience, and We really appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing more about your experiences.
All right, thank you.